I am just gonna hop on over ahead with a quick little video, not for Ramil's ties, but more so for this particular video by my favorite gacha streamer, Mr. Jenazad. Then after this, we can actually hop onto HSR's whatchamacall. HSR Nazal, right? Yay!
3D open world with another 10 on the way. That's a total of 16 3D open world gacha games. When will the madness end? We got Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, Tower of Fantasy, Arknight's Enfield, Seven Deadly Sins Origin, Neverness to Everness, Azure Premilia, Rewinding Cadence, Honkai Nexus Anima, Unending Dawn, Silver Palace, Wang Yue.
Okay, Honkai Nexus Anima is not an open world game, by the way, right? Actually, yeah, Honkai Nexus Anima is 100% not open world game. It is, I think it's like way more akin to like probably a mix between HSR and no, I think it's around HSR. It is definitely not open world game, so I don't want to do. Okay.
Varsapir, Project 2/3, Dragon Sword Awakening, and I'll add in Ananta as a special exception since people won't stop talking about in regards to 3D open world gacha games.
Doro.
I probably even missed some, and who knows how many others haven't even been announced yet. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Since there's so many 3D open world gacha games releasing, there's some question to ask. Is there open world gacha fatigue? Which will be the first to die? And who is making these games?
Bro,
let's address some of these questions in this video, but first, determine what the criteria for an open world 3D gacha is. I'd say the important aspects are 1, as an open world where a large part of the gameplay is about exploration. 2, as a gacha system related to pulling characters, and 3, you can jump. Why does jumping matter? Because an open world game with exploration doesn't really exist in this genre if you can't maneuver around with ease. Also, not being able to jump feels wrong. Ever sat in an MMO town and just jumped around while in a Discord call? Now, this giant boom for open world gachas all began with the release of Genshin Impact, making billions of dollars. And since then, there's been a crazy upsurge of games with similar systems. Noticing a lot of strangely similar UI elements in games, with denominations of currency being 160 per pull. The combat relying on 3 to 4 characters swapping between them and using a basic attack skill and ultimate. The endgame?
Wait, that's still better.
I'll have a multi-character swap combat with a timer-based endgame with tanky enemies that pose no real danger.
Daring today, aren't we?
Rock, make one of the first 2 areas be a Chinese-inspired anime fantasy world with characters whose names I can't pronounce without looking like a guaylo.
Whoa.
We see these similar systems over and over, and you bet a majority of these new games are going to have these copy-pasted again and again. Now, this isn't to say games are just the same because they share a few systems. On the contrary, many of these games are completely different. Azure Premilia, for instance, is a 3D open-world game with Pokemon monsters, while Wang Yue is a 3D open world with Pokemon monsters in a city! Or how about Neverness to Everness, where you have a sprawling open world urban environment where you deal with SCP-like anomalies, compared to Varsapura, where you deal with SCP anomalies in an urban open world. Let's not mention Ananta either. Now keep in mind, I'm not trying to say any games are copying each other, but rather that so many are being produced that many styles are starting to overlap even past the game systems, and some gacha players legitimately cannot tell the difference between some of these. At a certain point, players might start getting bored of the similar concepts of switch between characters to fight, pick up chests, do mindless events with a plucky little mascot. Now, one thing I've heard many say is that means you're burned out or there's open world gacha fatigue. But haven't you noticed that when you play a similar game with similar chores, you get bored faster, and it isn't really your fault? When Genshin released, players could spend hours doing menial tasks simply because it felt so new and fresh and they loved the style, like picking mint for hours. Even inconveniences or bad quality of life didn't really matter simply because it was just a joy to play. But with every new open world gacha game, players get bored faster, and update rolls around.
Oh my god, Annabelle Slender, he's done.
Might only be a couple of days at most. Majority of these updates are new story quest, new area, new character to spend pulls on, and a couple events with the depth of one of those games you see in a Facebook ad. Is it the player's fault that they grow tired of this? Who farmed the same gear, dealt the same RNG, farmed the same materials,
Jenazad doesn't play playing
spend the same
Genshin,
daily,
bro.
spent the same stamina,
Why is he
lost
talking
the
about
same
Genshin
50-50s,
Bro
finished
doesn't
the
even
same
know what's
endgame
Genshin.
across maybe 2 to 3 of these games. Rather than the player being burned out or open world games being fatigued, it's the games lacking ingenuity and copying the exact same framework. The issue isn't exactly that
Slandering
open
Goryo. Is
worlds
he
are
slandering
overdone.
Goryo?
It's
Just
that
slandering
games
Goryo.
all
I don't
keep
even know who
having
is he
the
slandering
same
anymore.
gameplay loop. A small amount of insight into this development
Dolo.
can paint a picture. Without stating which game
Look at my
and
name,
who gave this
Castellano. I
information,
see.
one of the
That's
games
very,
listed
very cool.
above that hasn't released is currently in a constant feud between developers and management. The developers want to incorporate unique ideas such as different combat styles and endgame mechanics and make the game stand
my
out
goodness,
more amongst
my
the
legacy,
competition,
chat.
but every time
My
they
legacy.
attempt to
This
bring
is
new
my
ideas
legacy.
to the table, the management responds
At least
with,
I
"That
made a
isn't what
legacy for the
Genshin
rest of my
does."
life, bro.
And no, this isn't a joke or
Miho.
an exaggeration. The very thing that inspired the game in the first place
And
is
there it
chaining
is.
it to the ground. Ideas are quashed due to there not already being a precedent in the current market. It definitely puts some things into perspective because who knows how many potential games will refuse to innovate. There's only so many people in the pool of gacha players, and it's hard to increase this pool so every game is competing for a similar audience. There must be a breaking point where a high production open world 3D anime game releases and it just simply flops because there's a limited pool of players. Which will be the first to end of service? Is it one already released or one that isn't even announced yet? Well, the answer is simple. It's already dead. Yeah, the first open world 3D gacha died, and probably barely anyone even knows. It's a game called Memento White Shadow. The game was essentially a Genshin-style open world mixed with a Honkai Star Rail-style combat system, but with PvP.
What
the game
the
was
fuck is
seriously
that, chat?
underbaked and didn't even last a year before closing, which is a shame because it actually had some promise. But the craziest part is that the game is actually attempting to relaunch, but who knows when that's happening. Now, something that I want to note
Well, I
is
have
that
no
out
idea
of
what
all
about that is, bro.
16 of these games, all except
Pages are
2
killer,
of
I see.
these are from China. Other 2 being from
Okie
Korea
slop.
and 0 from Japan. In an article interviewing Shuhei Yoshida from PlayStation, he said, "One reason why games in China are so strong is because they are made in an environment which allows for hiring a large number of personnel who can
region
work
gap is
long
crazy, bro.
hours." Acting like Japan didn't invent a word for death related to overwork. Japan invented the playbook for overworking employees. Have you ever met a Studio Mappa employee? Neither of their families. But the point remains that China is far outpacing other regions when it comes to these games. A friend of mine who works closely with Korean gacha companies has told me that many companies have realized they just can't even attempt to enter this market, and it's better to just work on non-gacha games. Supposedly, some Korean companies were even scared of Neverness to Everness's release, as its scale felt so enormous compared to what they could produce. There are currently 2 Korean gacha games, 7 Deadly Sins Origin and Dragon Sword Awakening. 7 Deadly Sins hasn't really made too many waves overall and had a fairly modest launch compared to most currently out, mostly carried by its IP, 7 Deadly
Holy
Sins. As for
shit.
Dragon Sword Awakening, it's supposed to be a spiritual successor to Dragon Nest, however they worked with a publisher named Webzen. Webzen has a bad reputation, but did something that no one expected. They completely screwed over the developers of the game by withholding $2.2 million they owed to them, to eventually lead to a hostile takeover. In retaliation, the developers decided to give infinite free currency to players because they couldn't make money anyways,
What
and they
the
also reached out to
fuck?
Korean YouTubers to cover the subject and put Webzen on blast.
Holy
Now the
shit.
game is releasing globally without gacha. Yeah, the game's
Oh my
actually a normally
God.
priced $30 game now when it releases. Since they now have to self-publish and all the drama occurred, it's become a normal game. So now there's only really a single 3D open world gacha game from outside of China. It is a bit comical that the country to literally invent gacha has fallen behind China in terms of quality and scale of the
And
media.
there it
Hell,
is.
China's even starting
Better
to ramp
learn-
up their own
better
anime
learn
industry, and
Mandarin,
who knows
chat.
where that'll be in a few years. Now let's finally just talk about what some of these games are that are releasing and what I think of them. Azure Familia is basically a Power World gacha game made by Azurlane devs.
Holy
My own
shit,
experience,
Aggle.
gameplay's fun and fluid with cool combat and building a town.
China.
Easy must play. Rewinding Cadence is a
China.
fantasy game with a visual novel timeline system and routes you can take. NPCs that can use AI to communicate and respond.
AI?
Every
Oh,
character
he's
has
done.
a stand they fight with.
He's done,
Lots
bro.
of promise, hopefully turns out well. Honkai next is Anima. Honestly, I was super underwhelmed. The game's first alpha felt like the game had no direction and needs serious overhaul. overall. It totally has time to change, but the initial impression felt lacking with its
Slender.
gameplay not seeming very interesting. Unending Dawn.
Slender.
Not really sure where this game's been, but it's basically an anime Souls-like, which could have some promise, but it's possible they decide not to go the gacha route in the end and make it a full-fledged game. It seems like it would take actual skill, and that cuts out 99% of potential gacha players. Lots of enemies taken from Elden Ring, but most footage is old and a lot can change. Silver Palace. Game has a ton of potential, and its narrative is immediately interesting in a steampunk magic England as a detective. Needs a lot of polish, but its early gameplay felt good. Wang Yue. Recent
I cleared Elden Ring, the DLC, Sekiro, and Black Myth Wukong, by the way. So I'm literally a Triple Crown gamer. I am Master League in StarCraft 2. I'm a Diamond Jungler in League of Legends. I cleared Pokemon Emerald Nuzlocke on my first try. So to say that I have skill issue, respectfully, you're just LARPing, bro. You're either LARPing or just slandering.
Incredible, but it's hard to create a city that feels meaningful and not large areas with no purpose. Had a lot of creativity from Breath of the Wild building and combining the world's Pokemon. Hopefully it turns out well. Barca Pura. Weaver's had this come out of nowhere, and the game looks incredible overall with a unique graphic style. Only issue is the combat is the exact same as like 5 different open world gachas.
I still can't believe Barca Pura is a
Hoyo game. That's also an
issue
that's
so different from like
Project 2/3 is probably a tentative name, but the game seemed interesting in a city of clouds and being able to manipulate gravity to navigate
you should change
around.
just shedding.
Similar to Bioshock Infinite. Guess what? You probably swap between characters to fight. Dragon Sword Awakening. Technically, it's changing from being a gacha, but launched in Korea initially as one. Actually has some unique combo-based combat and feels nice to play with no stamina system, and multiplayer dungeons is awesome. Ananta. I know it isn't a gacha, but everyone treats it as being similar. I tried it at Tokyo Game Show, and while being impressive, I was unsure the direction the game wanted other than anime GTA, but it was really high quality. But that about wraps up my thoughts on these upcoming 3D open world games.
Wait, speaking of this Doro little emo right here, bro, I know there's this brand new anime that came out. It kind of like exploded on Twitter. It's like this cat that she's like a chain smoker. I think it's like smoker cat or something. Oh my god, then she was like, bro, she's like a fucking loser, bro. Like, she legitimately is a fucking loser. Yeah, Yanni Nico. Yeah, bro. It was like all over Twitter, and like people were saying, oh my god, this is so fucking disgusting. But it's like, when they actually release an anime depicting like actual like girl failure and like depression and like just being a bum, and then people will be like, it's actually too disgusting for me. I will try to actually watch an anime. It looks very, very interesting to be actually such a full-on girl failure. But anyways, thank you, Mr. Doro, for this exceptional fucking video on its open world gacha fatigue reel. Before we bounce on over to the Clips channel, I believe. Okay, this is just purely my guess, right? This is just purely my guess, right? The way I see this trajectory happening, right, is that it won't stop until something bigger happens in the gacha space. So they need another Genshin moment to overtake the entire world. And I don't know if that is ever gonna happen again in our lifetime. But then again, no one expected Genshin to become that big as well from COVID. Because it's like, if they already have a business model and the business model proves that it works, then why would companies want to try to change the business model? It's way easier to improve on an existing business model than to create their own. Okay, not the business model as in like gacha game business model, but like the business model of open world adventure PvE gacha games. And a lot of the big titles, they seem to stem on the open world genre. And I don't think it's by any coincidence. Because the category farms. I mean, it does farm. That's why there are like so many different gacha games that's tied in this specific category. Like, for example, right, before gacha was big, it was a lot more focused on the PvP side of things. I think most gacha games back then, they always had some kind of a PvP element. Then ever since the Genshin thing happened, a lot of the bigger games basically moved away from PvP to focus on the overall thing. So if in the future another game, it doesn't even need to be MiHoYo, by the way. It could literally just be any game, because I think nowadays people already have the technology to make like good ass looking games that are like well optimized. So the market dominance or like the monopoly is no longer held by HoYoverse essentially. Right, because there are a lot more like engines, and like the graphics has definitely improved a lot over the past couple of years. So unless another Genshin moment, it doesn't have to be an open world game, but it needs to be like a Genshin moment where it completely changes everything, and like it revolutionized the gacha business model popularity that deviates away from open world. I don't think this phenomenon is ever gonna change, and a lot more gacha games are gonna try to get out of open world. But at the same time, it's also going to now. It doesn't need to have COVID. It doesn't need to be a world apocalypse, but it needs to have like that virality, right? Where enough people would be like, oh my god, this literally changed my life. And on top of having virality, right, being going viral, it needs to keep that momentum, which technically a lot of like triple A games, they can seize it, right? Like Expedition 33, right, when it came out, right? Elden Ring back in those days, right? The problem is making sure these things last. Because no matter how good a game is, especially for these kind of like one-time playthrough games, like not live service games, like non-live service games, you can't expand on that forever, which is different from a live service game like Gacha, right? So I think, right, personally speaking, if I have to choose a genre to be the next big thing in the entire world, it would be League. It would be League, bro. Because I think MOBA is like a undying category. Legit, bro. MOBA has been around for I think like 20 years at this point. All right, and it's like still so fucking popular. And right now in China, MOBA is like, I think if I'm not mistaken, top 3 category in terms of gaming. Right, the Valor of Kings, the 王者荣耀, right, and in Singapore, right, like in Southeast Asia, Mobile Legends Bang Bang. All right, I know y'all are gacha players, right? But like Mobile Legends Bang Bang is like insanely big, bro. Like it's like a completely different ecosystem, but that market is still relatively like untouched by gacha companies essentially. So if they were to make like some way somehow they can integrate MOBA with gacha, oh, I think that would be so fucking toxic. It will be exceptional, bro. Bro, imagine okay, I don't think they can pay to win MOBA because the entire fundamental point of a MOBA is to have no pay to win. It is all skills, right? But it will be very interesting if like a gacha company actually makes like a proper MOBA game, essentially. Yeah, so I think MOBA will probably be the next big thing if it ever becomes the next big thing in the gacha sphere. But until then, I don't think things are gonna change too much, right? All right. See you guys on the clip channel. Thank you. Honor of Kings has a pay to win shit. I'm not really sure how Honor of Kings work, but it is very, very, very big in CN, right?
You have cooled your last cool, my man.